an NFL franchise. The vibes are still extremely high in Cleveland. Some final thoughts from Sunday's action. Some thoughts on some things that are starting to leak out that we did not know about. We'll talk about it. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate you all who take the time to make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, the numbers keep going up, about to hit another milestone number. So let's get some more subscribers, some more everydayers. Subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available. It's always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Hope everybody's still riding the high. Certainly a change in, the feelings towards your Brownies. Everybody a little more upbeat. I think a lot of it has to do with, the belief being confirmed that most of you Browns fans and a lot of us who cover this team had, that, a change needed to be made, and you wanted to see if a change was made. And just because of the fact you think maybe there was a lot of meat being left on the bone. We're going to get to more on Jameis Winston and his impressive Browns debut in segment two. Some, just some thoughts here. Obviously, some things we learned Monday from the presser and, after following Sunday's win over the Baltimore Ravens. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah discharged from the hospital. Certainly a scary situation. Took a big hit. Good news, released. Availability as far as, the Chargers on Sunday during practice. Kevin Stefanski certainly, held back on commenting on any of that. But most importantly is, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is out of the hospital and will be okay. Denzel Ward did, in fact, suffer a concussion on Sunday, 6th in his career, 2nd this season. Look, there's probably some conversations to be had there, but that's not for us to have. We'll see this way that plays out, certainly, in the coming weeks here for Denzel. The one thing, and I kind of know this, from guys who played in the past and, suffered concussions, the town I live in, former Jets wide receiver Wayne Corbett also resides in. I've had the opportunity to run in Wayne a couple of times. And the one thing, as he was somebody who suffered a lot of concussions, he mentions is that it's taken at a much more serious rate and, care process now in the NFL than it was certainly, during his days and the days before. So you just try to think some positive thoughts here, certainly for Denzel Ward, as he's going through, what's got to be, a difficult spot for him, a guy that just gives everything he can to this team, to this franchise, has been a dominant player. And certainly this is something that's, kind of been an Achilles heel for him. I was told, as a kid, cornerbacks tackle, safeties hit, and, Denzel sometimes, has the situation get the best of him. Thinking about number 21, always appreciated the efforts on and off the field, certainly. Jason Lloyd on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show yesterday revealed, and look, Jason was the one who finally had, basically the proof to it, but I think we all kind of knew it. Look, Dawan Jones, and, the story is that Dawan Jones, at one point, not a specific date, the weight mark for Dawan cleared 400, and it didn't stop there. It got to almost 415 for Dawan Jones. Now, coming out of Ohio State, this was certainly a concern for Dawan. When the Browns first drafted him, this was a concern that they had. Look, Dawan Jones is an immensely large human being. And, I'm probably not even saying that with the justice it deserves. Somewhere between 6'9", there were rumors this offseason that they thought he maybe even grew to 6'10". Who the heck knows? Weight, probably ideally plays somewhere in the 370 range. I know the Browns would like him at 355. That may be an unrealistic number because you just look at his body type, and there's not a small part on Dawand's body. He's got big calves. He's got big tree trunk legs. He's got a big middle section. He's got a bigger upper body. He's just a huge dude. So for Dawand, and this is kind of what happens, in some things that people don't necessarily think about. We don't know necessarily what his rehab process was last year. And so for a guy like Dawand being that big, keeping your weight right is a difficult enough task as it is. Without being able to go full 100% workout mode, rehab is a heck of a lot different than what would be termed off-season conditioning. You are, building your body back up. So you're not doing what you would normally be doing if you had a healthy off season. Not that anybody necessarily has a healthy off season. But to his credit, Dawand, now that he is healthy, apparently has been busting his butt to get that number down. We had his first career start at left tackle on Sunday. And, according to PFF and certainly, on film, I don't think anybody's going to, mistake him for Anthony Munoz anytime soon. But you did see a good effort out there. You saw effort 100% from whistle to whistle, which is certainly something that a lot of us have questioned about the former left tackle. The run blocks were good. This offensive line is starting to look like the offensive line we expect them to be. I know age is caught up. You had, 3 of your top 6 offensive linemen coming back from off-season knee injuries. Joe Batonio, is no spring chicken at this point. Ethan Posic's been banged up. Wyatt Teller missed a month. But this group collectively on Sunday started to have a look of an offensive line we're familiar with here for the Cleveland Browns over the last few years. Ran block, much better. Run block, much better, rather. Pass pro was much better. Jameis Winston was decisive and quick with his decision-making, which led to a 300-yard day, certainly, and 3 touchdowns from the new Cleveland Browns signal caller. So, an inspired effort all around, certainly with your backs up against the wall. The week before, everything kind of went poorly with Deshaun's injury, players and fans kibitzing with each other, and, a situation that nobody wants to be in. And it could have led to a real, even uglier situation Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. But to his credit, Coach Stefanski, the rest of the coaching staff and players and everybody in that locker room remained focused on the task at hand, which was going out and giving a solid effort against Baltimore Ravens, which did, in fact, turn into a 29-24 victory. Now, whether or not the season is saved, way too early to tell. But it's a lot easier to show back up to work this week to play the Chargers at 2-6 than it would have been at 1-7. Speaking of the game Sunday against the Chargers, we will have Jameis Winston as QB1 yet again. We're going to talk about all that and more on your latest Locked On Browns. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers commit $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check your latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win and your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, if you're not a part of it by now, make a new plan. Stand, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Do not miss any of the action. We got bye-week coverage coming up next week. There's going to be an episode that's going to drop later today, kind of giving you maybe a vision of what could be the Cleveland Browns quarterback room for 2025. You do not want to miss a thing. And I am excited for next week, bye week. We're going to book some draft episodes. We're going to bring some voices on here that you haven't heard in a while. Going to be fun times. You do not miss any of the action. Of course, afterwards, stay on for Locked On NFL. Get your daily morning dose with Tyler Rowan. Get your daily afternoon dose, of course, with the amp, the barber, Mr. Tony Wiggins. Jameis Winston will be quarterback 1 Sunday against the Los Angeles Chargers. I know there's a lot of talk about whether or not the Browns, how much they want to get to see DTR. And my first, thought here is you're not going to take the guy out who did what he did on Sunday against the Ravens. So kudos certainly to Jameis Winston. There was so much talk in the offseason of, well, we didn't bring back Joe Flacco, and it went on and on and on. But essentially, you did bring back Joe Flacco. He just brought back a different version. You brought back a 30-year-old Joe Flacco, a guy that has the ability to either throw you into a game or throw you out of a game. And, just as Joe Flacco had been a consistently, streaky performer at times in his career, the same certainly could be said for the current signal caller in Jameis Winston. But what you saw and what I told most people in the weeks leading up to this, where I wanted to see Jameis Winston, is that Jameis Winston was going to go out throwing. How many of you guys, me, how many others did we or anybody say in the first 7 games of the season, throw the ball, he said throw the ball. And a lot of times Deshaun just did not do that. His time in the pocket before throwing the ball was well over 3 seconds. Jameis Winston on Sunday was at 2.44. Things that we've talked about a million times. I know I mentioned it in the post-game show is there is not necessarily a pecking order for the Browns as far as who's getting the ball. The way the Kevin Stefanski offense works is if you're open, and that means whether or not you are Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, if you're the open guy, you're the target. Here's where the ball's going. The whole point of his offense is not to force feed any one receiver. It is to have a quarterback go through the progressions as quickly as possible, because Coach Stefanski is going to have an open guy. And that is what you saw. Now, Cedric Tillman working with Jameis Winston, we get these type of scenarios. You get a guy who necessarily doesn't play a lot with the number 1 quarterback. So Jameis and Cedric Tillman certainly had some decent work put in together. With Amari Cooper being moved right before the Bengal game, Deshaun going down in the Bengal game now led for Jameis Winston to go out there and, have a rapport with some of the guys that maybe didn't get as many reps with Deshaun Watson. One of those guys, Cedric Tillman. And, for Ced, just a huge day. And, these are things, and I've talked about this a lot. This isn't something that necessarily happens with first round picks. But when you are a guy who's been drafted after the first round, it's not that you doubt yourself. It's not that you question yourself, but you need basically that affirmation process of where you start, stacking together either a very good day or, for Cedric Tillman, 2 straight weeks of very good days. 8 for 81 against the Bengals, 2-point conversion, 7 for 99, 2 touchdowns Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, all of a sudden, if you're Cedric Tillman, you play with a little less nerves. You start to play with a little bit more of a higher level of confidence, which is the way everyone should take the field. But until you have proven yourself and put up some production in the NFL, there is certainly that creep of doubt that goes into your mind. And, am I this good? Yes, I played well in college. Yes, I performed well in the SEC. I played everybody, Bama, Georgia, blah, 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 blah. But this is the NFL, and this is the 0.0003% of the 0.0003%. And for Cedric, a coming out party over the last 2 weeks. If you remember, he did have a real solid game last year in Denver. Again, with a quarterback, he had a really good relationship in DTR, as their relationship goes all the way back, certainly to high school in Nevada, Bishop Gorman, if I do recall correctly. Now, do you think or do you hope you can get this Joe Flacco-like run from Jameis Winston? Look, what Joe Flacco did last year at 40 years old was impressive. It really was. But it is also not that outside of the box to think that you can get a similar run here from JW. It's not. This guy won a national championship at Florida State as a redshirt freshman. This guy was the number 1 overall pick in an NFL draft. He's only 30 years old. And, sometimes being removed from playing, you start to grow in other ways. You're certainly digesting a lot more film. And sometimes watching somebody else play the position that you play helps you change, helps you improve, helps you grow as a player. And I think that has kind of really happened for Jameis. And if there's one thing he probably really took away from watching the Deshaun Watson film, is simple. This ball's got to get out. And part of how Jameis is able to translate that to himself is, I'm not the athlete Deshaun Watson is. I know I'm not. So for Jameis, he understands that. So it's, and you start with that first throw to Njoku. I mean, that throw does not get the credit it deserves. First off, you're almost throwing it blindly because you're throwing it to a spot. You've got a defender in great underneath position. You're basically taking, your faith in your tight end and David Njoku, knowing if I hit it in that exact, I was always taught, and they always taught the quarterbacks, it's the triangle. Sorry for the poor triangle, the triangle of opportunity. But basically, you're trying to get the nose of the ball through that triangle. And he did just that, right outside the fingertips of the defender. David, look, nobody would have critiqued David Njoku if he did not catch that pass. That was an impossible ball to get his hands on. So he did. And boom, confidence now there. And look, the Ravens backed off a lot. And they were giving up some illegally. Cedric Tillman, the touchdown. The blitz came. And what did Jameis Winston do? Went right to the spot where the blitz came from. So Cedric Tillman caught the ball. Wasn't anybody within 4 to 5 yards of him. And now all of a sudden you got Cedric Tillman at good size, loose in the secondary. One of the things we talk about with Cedric Tillman, bring something to the wide receiver room that some of the other wide receivers do not. Big, physical. Looking at the other Browns wide receivers, he looks closer to a tight end than he most certainly looks like a wide receiver. So we'll get JW again on Sunday against the Los Angeles Chargers. And, are the Browns going to write this season? Again, way too early for those discussions. But you look at that schedule and you look at these next 4 games, and there's a chance here. There is a chance for this team to play really well over these next 4 games. And, whenever you're talking about a team that's under 500, this, that, and the other thing, as far as where they can get within a season, it's trying to get yourself back to 500. There's a possibility they could get back to 500 within their next 4 games. It's going to take a Herculean effort. And, certainly there's questions to be had this week going into next week as far as if the Browns are going to move, change the roster at all. We'll do this in segment 3 here, because there is talk of a lot of change possibly still coming to the Cleveland Browns. And I don't know that one Sunday necessarily is going to change that thought process, but we'll continue our conversation on it. Your latest Locked On Browns rolls on. As always, we appreciate you all for being along for the ride. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How you can spend it wisely to improve yourself is of utmost importance. Look, you all went to school, you went to college, but you know what? It was almost kind of predetermined by people who got you through your high school years, what you should study, what your interest should be, what your potential major should be when you got to college. Now you're older, you're more matured, your views have changed. Maybe your level of how you wanted to be educated has changed. That's why Hillsdale College is a real interesting opportunity. You can study history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. If you didn't study these things in school, because it probably wasn't relative to your major, but maybe now you feel like an idiot when you're at dinner parties because there's not something that you can maybe contribute to these conversations. So it's either a way to learn it or maybe a chance to refresh yourself. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world in our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to a Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism, all things to continue your mind to be stimulated and your thirst to know more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just go on in, absorb the lectures so you feel like you are getting something out of it. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu, locked on to register. hillsdale.edu/locked on. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win again up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks puts the members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. If you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. If you think Justin Jefferson can clear 83.5 yards next week, go ahead and bet it. If you think Lamar Jackson will score less than 2.5 touchdowns, go ahead and bet it. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Go to the app right now and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody who makes the show the first listen every single day. Everyday crowd. You guys are fantastic. I suggest everybody join them. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available, always free wherever you get your podcasts. Now, a lot of questions, how much does Sunday change? Well, the question is how much was at stake going into Sunday? Was Kevin Stefanski's job on the line? Is it on the line? We don't know. What we do know is the head coach just signed about 6 months ago a contract extension. Andrew Berry, where does he stand in all this? Again, your general manager just signed a contract extension 6 months ago. The owner, well, he's not going anywhere. Everybody, who was playing Deshaun Watson? Why was Deshaun Watson still playing? Why wasn't he benched? Yes, these are all great questions, but they don't necessarily going to give us the answers, or it's going to change the fact that this football team is now 2-6. Are players like Zadarius Smith and maybe Greg Newsome, are these guys still on the trade block? Very well could be. You need to look at your team for today and tomorrow. If you're not doing that, you are running your franchise incorrectly. Look, Zadarius Smith, the production is maybe not necessarily there, but he is getting pressure at a good amount of rate. Dawan Jones, a player whose stock is probably back up. Mahmoud Diabate, a player whose stock is back up. I would say back up, but is just up. And you really see there could be a future relationship there between JOK and Diabate as your top 2 linebackers for the Cleveland Browns. Mike Hall, if you're just looking at the box scores and that type of stuff, you're maybe not getting the full read on Mike Hall. And yes, the production may not be there yet in numbers, but you need to understand that Mike Hall is just getting going here. But what you see on film, you see the athletic traits that the Cleveland Browns fell in love with. You see a young man at a very young age who has great hand usage. You see a guy who is going to be a starting tackle for this team in the future. Still, in my opinion, should be a starting tackle today. Start the growth process, start the acceleration, put him on that path. Your cornerback room is something that's certainly going to be monitored here over the next few days. You believe Denzel Ward most likely will be unavailable this week. Newsome, Emerson, they're not playing their best ball right now. And I think both of these guys know this. Cameron Mitchell's guys are certainly going to get some more reps. We're not going to see any more Lassie as he has obviously, been released. Miles Harden, I don't know what the deal is there, but I would really, really like to, see that Miles Harden can start getting his way back to the field and getting some effort here and some time here with this team. We'll see how it all plays out. You have your special team corners that are probably going to start to have to play some reps. There's no question about it. Not necessarily the path the Browns wanted to go, but it's just the way you're in. It is way too early to tell that if the Browns, are looking to make any changes. And for continuity's sake, Ken Dorsey is probably not going anywhere after the end of the year. So if the Browns want to continue this relationship with Ken Dorsey, they probably have every opportunity to. And if it's an opportunity where maybe you were going to look at Jameis Winston as to be the veteran of that quarterback room next week, and again, we're going to drop an episode later today and try to give you a vision of what could be the 2025 quarterback room. Last thing you do is when you want to change things. If Ken Dorsey's here and you want to see more from DTR, you want to see more from Jameis Winston, you're hoping that this offense can continue to play like it did on Sunday so you can have the continuity to have that rolling over into an offseason, into training camp, into preseason, and hopefully into 2025. So, does Sunday save any of these big decisions the Cleveland Browns have to make? No. As far as trading players, they do have up until next Sunday, and then they go into the bye weeks because 4 o'clock on Tuesday, November 5th, also Election Day, the Browns will have to have their mind made up whether or not they are going to move on from some players and maybe add some more draft capital. They're already in a really good spot draft capital-wise. They don't necessarily have to do it, but it's certainly something to consider. Again, you run your team for today, but you also run your team for tomorrow. A lot covered here today. Injuries, the Dawan Jones story, why it's going to be Jameis Winston again here against the Chargers, and it could be Jameis Winston for the short foreseeable future. And then, of course, some thoughts here on whether or not the Browns and any big decisions coming their way were altered by Sunday's win. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd is a bunch of filthy animals, but they're my filthy animals. I suggest you also become a filthy animal and do that by subscribing to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go Browns.